I'm haunted by the casualty rates the Confederation has suffered in every skirmish with the Zella. Entire army groups wiped out in mere hours, overwhelmed, torn apart. Armor divisions vaporized by their bio-titan weaponry, our garrisons pulverized into bloody remnants by their relentless warrior advances, and our fleets shredded in the orbit of every planet we defended by armadas that blotted out the stars. The Zax do not negotiate or engage in diplomacy, except to demand the absolute surrender of the conquered species. They harvest the biological essence of the living to bolster their ranks, a monstrous species that employs any warfare tactics to gain a tactical edge. They may not feel fear, but they masterfully manipulate it, employing psychotropic gases, terror tactics, and targeting civilians and the wounded for maximum psychological impact. When informed that humanity would join the fray, our spirits were anything but high. What could one more nascent race contribute besides a few more ships to buy us a few precious minutes to evacuate civilians and the wounded? Pessimism was rife, and soon bets were made on how long humanity would fight before fleeing back to their home system to await annihilation. How many lives would they waste in this futile war? The wagers were as grim as our odds of seeing another day. Then, they arrived. When the Zilix launched their ground offensive over Psychus, the 17th Army Group was commanded to hold them back by any means necessary. We were assigned reinforcements from humanity, calling themselves the Fifth Order. Apparently, they were led by a seasoned commander from humanity's last interhuman War of Unification. Honestly, we couldn't have cared less. Well, I'm certain the Zax cared even less at that point. That is, if any of you have been fortunate enough never to witness those thrice-cursed fiends wage war. I bless your ignorance, my kinsmen. The Zax are a nightmare, a heavily genetically modified race predating the Confederation's founding. We neither knew nor cared about their origins that day. They swarmed us with their infantry, terrifying bioforms of flesh and bone, reconstituted from every biological entity they had slain, captured, and harvested. Armed with graft weapons and war-modified for combat, they were followed by their spider tanks and overwhelming super-heavy armor, crushing the ground beneath grav engines. Their lightest armor made our heaviest look insubstantial, their bio-titans capable of decimating battalions single-handedly, and their ships laid down brutal orbital barrages, indifferent to the concepts of friendly fire or civilian casualties. To them, we were merely more biomass to harvest, to be repurposed into new warrior forms for their war machine. And so they advanced, firing corrosive bolts of acid that dissolved tanks and bunkers, beams of catalytic energy that melted flesh and bone. Then they attacked with sharp and blunt appendages fashioned from bio-enhanced bone, swords, blades, spikes, and maces designed to butcher, kill, harvest, and feed. Having witnessed enough friends die, I understood how hopeless, how unattainable our defense was. Yet, 20 million lives depended on us holding the line. And so, we tried. I swear to you, we did, with our heaviest armor anchored behind defensive emplacements and plasma shields, with artillery capable of leveling mountains, and war striders that towered over the cities we defended. We fought with everything we had. 100 species ready for battle, plasma and laser weapons primed, servo armor polished and prepared, trenches dug, and soldiers at their stations. We engaged them at 7:12 local time. Our lines began to falter by 8:23. The perimeter was breached by 9:01, 10 minutes longer than the most optimistic predictions had granted us. Protocol and the chain of command were disregarded as I desperately implored the humans to deploy whatever they could to the spaceport to protect as many civilians as possible. At 9:02, you've likely read the transcript of my court-martial. Yes, I shot my superior officer because he refused to set aside his pride and request aid. Yes, I regret nothing. The humans responded at 9:03 with a single transmission on an open channel, understood, Agita command. Starfall authorized. Knights on their way. "Look to the heavens, we are coming." So, I looked up, not knowing what to expect. I didn't understand what night meant then. The translator offered no definition, just a simple explanation of a mounted soldier in armor, devoted to a cause. At that moment, my concern was minimal. Then I witnessed it in the sky. Have any of you ever seen a real meteor shower? Not the holofictions, but a genuine celestial event. If so, you've seen what I saw then, hundreds of points of light and fire descending from the heavens like fine rain, like legends from a doomed era. I remember thinking how few they were and how meager their strength appeared. Yet, I was amazed, they had cast themselves into the inferno willingly. And their descent reignited a spark in my troops who dug in, refusing to yield another inch until the humans made landfall. They came to die alongside us. The least we could do was stay alive until their arrival. I managed to reorganize our lines and contain the Zalad breaches along our defenses. When the human commander requested coordinates for what he termed nightfall, I didn't understand what he meant, but I provided him the locations of our breaches. "Understood," he replied, perhaps chuckling at his own audacity. "Brace for impact and clear the splash area, tyrannies are inbound." I laughed too, wondering, splash area? What are tyrannies? I had no idea, but at that moment, it didn't matter. We were overrun with enemy armor, and my forces were fracturing. So, I bolstered those positions with everything at my disposal. I recall seeing a Zack Spider tank clamber over the wall at Breach 6, its body swarming with warrior forms and armaments, its thick arachnid legs propelling it over the barrier, unleashing fire and destruction. I fired my pistol in desperation. What else could I do? Helixes and Tans were beside me, unloading all their firepower on the beast's thick hide. We barely made a dent, having run out of proper anti-armor munitions 10 minutes earlier. The previous tank that had breached our lines was a smoldering wreck on the other side, thanks to a recklessly brave private who had charged it and detonated 2 full belts of grenades. We had no more grenades of that caliber, nor did we have more recklessly brave privates. The tank turned its main plasma accelerator on a squad to my left, reducing them to half-melted corpses before swinging its turret back towards us. I wondered what death would feel like and whether there was truly anything beyond this life. Then the sound came, a shriek that morphed into the roaring of some primordial beast, evoking an image of scales, claws, fire, and wings that eclipsed the sun. And they landed directly on the tank. The shockwave was immense, knocking me to the ground and sending the warrior forms atop the tank flying. The tank itself buckled and collapsed, its armor cracking and fluids leaking from the impact zones. A strange, eerie silence filled the breach for a moment as I managed to stand and survey the scene. Had it been a lucky shot from our fleet? Unlikely ordnance from theirs? Space debris? The answer emerged from the smoke, only 5 of them, but they felt like an army. Clad head to toe in sleek black armor that made them appear larger than any Felixian or Oro, they resembled mythical deities. The black armor was etched with symbols and sigils I didn't understand at the time. Some remain a mystery, but one was clear, the mark of leadership. The lead figure wore a kind of holographic armor over its power suit, the emblem a bright orange quadruped, reptilian, with wings spread wide against a stormy backdrop. Its helmet mirrored this image, the visor lenses glowing beneath the snout of the beast, its ears flaring into wing-like crests that adorned the helmet. And yes, it wore a cape, a flowing, deep orange cape that billowed almost casually in the breeze. I remember thinking how absurd it seemed then, when the dust of battle settled, but in that moment, it endowed them with an aura of mythic power, as if they had stepped out of a child's fairy tale to slay every monster from beyond the stars. And perhaps they had decided the Zaks were worthy foes for such legendary wrath. But it wasn't the cape, the ornate armor, or their dramatic arrival that struck me, it was their armament. They carried shoulder-mounted ordnance and weapons slung at their backs, but their hands were not filled with rifles or long guns. Instead, they wielded blades, hammers, and daggers. The leader, the decorated warrior, brandished twin longswords, one in each hand. Another, bearing a roaring golden feline emblem against the same stormy backdrop, held what looked like a breaching axe, alien in design and far deadlier in function. A third, a giant even among its peers, wielded a massive two-handed hammer, its head resembling a cannon, the same beast depicted howling atop a colossal pillar on its chest, with the storm raging behind it. The fourth, noticeably shorter, was crouched over a fallen warrior form, prodding it with one of many varied knives. This one's armor was adorned with bones and feathers, giving it the appearance of a demon from a primitive tale. It wasn't as polished as the others but was designed to intimidate. It wore a collar of teeth and seemed to be dissecting the dead warrior form until it realized there were still living enemies around. The last was slightly taller than the fourth, its armor depicting a blue tree standing proud against a stormy background, and to my relief, it wielded a recognizable weapon, a long-barreled, scoped rifle. For a few moments, no one moved. Then the reptilian warrior spoke over an open channel, his voice amplified by speakers. The laws of chivalry compel me to offer you a chance for surrender or retreat from this world. The offer is made, choose quickly or face Jovian wrath. It took me a moment, an insane moment, to realize he was addressing the Zelak, not us. An insane moment to wonder who would be so foolish as to offer terms to a species bent on the extermination and assimilation of every biological life form. As expected, the CYX opened fire on them. That's when the real carnage began. After what felt like an hour of continuous gunfire but were merely seconds, the Xyla ceased fire and surveyed the aftermath of the 5 humans. Amidst the smoke, the same voice declared, "We'll take that as a polite thank you, but no. Tyranny Amaranth, cleanse them all." Then came the hypervelocity slugs. I'd seen railguns fire from cruisers and heavy tanks before, but never from shoulder-mounted weapons. Like blue fire, razor-sharp slugs of metal tore the enemy warrior forms from their feet, disintegrating them into chunks of flesh. One volley, 5 knights, 24 dead warrior forms. I still can't believe it. From the smoke where they had vanished, they charged into melee, which seemed even more suicidal than offering the Zilla terms of surrender. I fully expected the hulking flesh minters to tear those 5 apart. It was then I understood what knight meant, why it was defined as a mounted warrior in armor and a human devoted to a cause. Earth, their homeworld, is a death world, but we had never seen anything particularly perilous there. Sure, there were impressive fauna and flora, and dangerous creatures capable of killing with a mere touch, but the true reason it was deemed a death world was the humans themselves. While not physically imposing, at least not more than our fitter races, they possessed 2 perilous gifts. The first was their nearly boundless well of creativity and determination to always move forward. They did not relent or retreat if there was anything to be achieved. In that aspect, they appeared impressive and even admirable. The second gift was their psionic abilities. I'm sure most of you have heard rumors that humanity experimented with psionics to achieve a sort of transcendence into the field. It's true, confirmed to me by their high-ranking officers and an openly acknowledged fact among their people and society. They possess wondrous abilities, such as communicating telepathically, enhancing their speed and physical strength, and much more. I lied earlier, senators. They have another gift, though I would prefer to call it a curse. They can adapt anything to war, and their psionics are no exception. They have armor linked to their very essence, what they refer to as the soul, weapons powered by their minds that slice through reinforced ship plating with ease, spontaneous combustion abilities, actual lightning cast from their hands, and the ability to fly. I barely saw the reptilian warrior when he surged forward on some sort of anti-gravity harness that afforded him a degree of mobility that seemed almost magical as he cut, shredded, and vivisected XYLX warriors like paper. He was shielded, for I could see the shimmer of a protective aura whenever he slowed enough for me to keep up with his movements, even though no shot reached him at range. He was lethally efficient with his shoulder-mounted cannon and the weapon at his hip, a sort of assault rifle that accelerated projectiles to a fraction of the speed of light. All of them made short work of the warrior forms, but up close, had we been a more superstitious race, I might have likened them to deities of death. The humans had a term for them, angels of death. It was an apt moniker. I witnessed the one with the hammer crushing tanks under its weight, the sniper eliminating leader forms from impossible distances, the lion warrior with its axe tearing open transports and rending them to pieces, and the one adorned in feathers methodically slicing through XYLX warriors, searching for weak points and instilling a primal fear of humanity in them. 5 human knights, that was all it took to secure that breach, and they deployed a full contingent of 100 to Addis. Witnessing them was like observing mythical beings, their speed, power, and ferocity, their uncanny ability to anticipate where enemy fire would originate, how they synchronized with one another, how they handled threats. I saw a knight sever the turret of an enemy tank and fire his weapon inside while 2 of his comrades eliminated commander forms that charged him in perfect sync. They moved, killed, and when united in those 5 soldier teams, those tyrannies, they became whirlwinds of death. The reptilian warrior, he killed so many Xylax warriors, commanders, and armored units that when he finally withdrew among the last of his kind to board the evacuation ships, he was so drenched in blood, oil, and radioactive dust that his engineers had to cut him out of his armor. And he seemed pleased by it, as did they all. They joked, laughed, and recounted feats once we were in transit. I had the, I suppose, pleasure of traveling on a human cruiser, the Reign of Vengeance. The crew held these men in high esteem, as if they were symbols of humanity. They behaved as such, always proud, always determined. Every time they entered a room, the sailors saluted and stood at attention, even though, by my understanding, they were not required to. I inquired why. An infantry commander named Alistair Whiteborn explained it to me. These knights are among the most gifted psionics of humanity, trained to the brink to form a corps of enhanced super soldiers capable of facing any threat in groups of 5. These groups, called tyrannies, were named after an ancient predatory beast from human mythology, dragons, which formed packs known as tyrannies. These tyrannies then grouped into wings, which assembled into flights, and those into thunders. I asked why they were called thunders. The reptilian warrior, who I later learned was named Cyrus Amaranth of Europa, a moon of their gas giant Jupiter, elucidated, ever heard the sound of almost 100 knights soaring through the air? It's the thunder heralded by the coming lightning, and as such, we're only heard after we've already struck. We didn't win that battle, they didn't have the manpower or supplies to sustain a prolonged engagement, but for the first time in years, our casualty rates were lower than those inflicted upon the XYL. And I don't care what Admiral Copan tells you, but I witnessed the Xylax fleet as we departed the planet. The human vessels operate on an entirely different scale. Their flagship, 6 kilometers long, is twice the size of our largest dreadnought. Their railguns can unleash absolute torrents of firepower across vast distances in mere seconds, and their energy lances and ordnance surpass anything I've ever seen. I nearly wept with joy when their ships commenced what might be the progenitor of all orbital bombardments on the Xylax forces on the ground, turning the planet's surface into molten glass and denying those fiends any scrap of biological material. So, as my personal judgment and recommendation to this august assembly of the Confederation, I wish to be blunt and speak my mind. Shut up. We cannot win this war without humanity. It's not merely my opinion, it's a fact. They have technology and firepower beyond us because, for centuries, they waged war against each other, nearly reaching annihilation, and learned to conduct warfare in ways we have barely dreamed of. They understand conflict, they understand battle, and they thrive in it. They've fought among themselves for millennia, and their recent unity has not weakened them. More importantly, they possess a fierce moral code that prompted them to assist us in the first place. They had no reason to intervene, to drop from the sky and sacrifice a dozen of their knights and hundreds of their soldiers to save us. They did it because, in Knight Amaran's own words, it was the right thing to do. They value honor, duty, right, and truth. They believe in ideals that, for them, are millennia old and have only recently been reaffirmed as central to their vast society. They fight for what is right and for those who cannot defend themselves. We need their help, we need their ships, and we need every damn knight they can muster to win this war. They have legions of infantry trained for combat, veterans of countless conflicts. Battalions of armor that make our own look pathetic, and from what I've seen and heard, they're war. Striders are built to conquer continents. All of this is coordinated by their psionic gift, their unity, as they call it, a formidable, war-tested engine of destruction. They do not take kindly to the shedding of innocent blood. They are eager for war against such monstrosities, to engage in pure combat against an evil that cannot be reasoned with. Maybe it's not enough, maybe it never was. But for the first time since this massacre began, we've made the Zaks hesitate. They've slowed their advance to the southern and northern rims, and their all-out assault on the mid-rim has stalled. They're constructing fortresses and defensive networks on conquered and harvested worlds, something they've never done before. They're summoning void stations from the depths of space, fully expecting us to go on the offensive with humanity's aid, to strike back now that their momentum has been stolen and they've been proven vulnerable. I say, senators, let's not disappoint them. Call up the reserves, ignite the furnaces of the war industry, open every arsenal we possess, lift all restrictions on armaments for the Confederation, and provide the humans with all the aid we can afford, all the resources and intelligence we have on the enemy. Let them do what humanity has historically proven they excel at. From their world wars to the eugenic crusades, from the unification of the moons to the Kyrian Blitz, from the massacre of the Inner Belt to the rise of the Hierophant Court, from Dragonfall to the Dragon Rise, from the First War of Sol to the Third, from the cry of the blood of Mars to the War of Cinders, from the breaking of Luna to the defense of Earth, let them fight, for they are adept at vanquishing monsters. Field Marshal Udi, during the Senate session advocating,